It's been a long run to this point, but I think today is a cause for celebration because it is the clearest indication yet of what it means to enable a party like the Democratic Alliance, fighting for the people of South Africa, to have the balance of power in the national parliament. It is where we can make your voice count, because you gave us the muscle and you gave us the numbers to be able to stand up and stop things that will be fundamentally detrimental to the people of South Africa. So that is a cause for celebration, and it is one of the moments that we can look back and say what the election of 2024 actually meant. It gave us the balance of power in Parliament, and it enables us to take a strong stand to be your voice, to stop the things that you don't want. And today is one of those victories. Now, it came as a surprise to me when very late last night I was called by our lawyers to say, we have been approached with a settlement offer by the lawyers for the Minister of Finance. Why did that take me by surprise? Because less than 1 week before that, in his answering affidavit in our court case, the Minister of Finance made it absolutely clear that the VAT increase of 0.5% would go ahead on the 1st of May. And that was merely a week ago today. And in that replying affidavit, it's a thick wad of paper which is over here, the Minister says the VAT rate is therefore set to increase to 15.5% on the 1st of May. That was the culmination of a long argument as to why it was necessary and why it was unavoidable. And then he says the process to pass this type of legislation contemplated in 7.4 is already underway. On the 12th of March, I published the draft rates and monetary amounts and amendment of revenue laws bill. A copy of the draft bill is attached, where he shows that they will give permanent legislative effect to the new VAT rate of 15.5%. Now, this was 1 week ago, a categorical answer in his affidavit to our court case. And so there he said there was no alternative to the VAT increase, and late last night our lawyers were saying to me the Minister wants to reach an out-of-court settlement. Now, what happened between last Thursday and yesterday, which was Wednesday? What happened was the DA's challenge, which was heard in court on Tuesday. And that day was absolutely pivotal because our excellent legal team made the case as to why the VAT increase should be interdicted and why the Minister had made the announcement in terms of an unconstitutional power allocated to him under the VAT Act. And secondly, why the process by which the Finance Portfolio Committee had supposedly adopted the fiscal framework when that proposal was actually never before the committee, and why an unlawful outcome and irrational outcome of the Finance Portfolio Committee had landed before Parliament as a whole, which adopted a fiscal framework that had unprocedurally and unlawfully and irrationally emerged out of the Portfolio Committee and the Standing Committee in the NCOP. The arguments were so clearly framed that I have no doubt that the Minister's legal team went back to him on Wednesday morning, the day after our court case, and said it looks as if it is going to be inevitable that the 0.5% VAT increase that takes effect on the 1st of May could well be set aside by the court. And in that context, it seemed better for the Minister to concede before he was perceived to have been forced to by the outcome of the DA's court challenge. And that is what has clearly happened in the last week. Now, it's also crucial from the DA's perspective that we set out these circumstances, because there's no doubt that the minister, in trying to save face, will seek to present this as the result of his discussions with the smaller parties. The issue that the ANC fears more than anything else is that the public will come to understand the extent of the DA's muscle in holding the balance of power and the impact that we can make both through the political process and then the legal process if the political process proves impermeable as it did this time. And so the minister needs to somehow save face by saying, I'm making this concession and I'm doing it after the consultations with the smaller parties. And obviously the smaller parties will want to claim some credit in having negotiated their way out of a VAT increase. That argument obviously cannot hold water, because a lot of negotiations had happened supposedly with the smaller parties before last Thursday. And yet last Thursday, the minister categorically said that the VAT increase would go ahead and that there was indeed no alternative to it, and that the Rates Act, as it's called in its abbreviated form, would be passed and would make provision for the 0.5% VAT increase. So it was clear that the DA's court intervention was the pivotal intervening factor that has enabled the people of South Africa to come out victorious and to show them why their vote really mattered. It is crucially important for us to hold the balance of power at the will of the voters so that we can win battles not by grace and favor of kind concessions by the ANC, but because we have the numbers in Parliament and we have the muscle in the courts and the arguments in the courts to stand up for the public who make it possible for us. This is the victory of all South African taxpayers. We'd like to thank you all for coming into this fight shoulder to shoulder with us. We'd like to thank you in your thousands for having signed our petitions and stood with us in this battle. And we will continue to fight for all South Africans, especially the poor and the marginalized, in seeking economic growth, in seeking job creation, and in seeking responsible public spending so that the government does not keep on raising your taxes to fund unlawful expenditure, corruption, and sheer waste. And so the DA will now be pushing very hard for the necessary spending review. Long before this process began, we made proposals to the national government on how we could dramatically save money in the current budget to avert and prevent an increase in any form of taxation. The minister refused to listen to this. He kept on making it an issue about cutting frontline services when all the savings that the DA had proposed avoided cutting the crucial frontline services. We want to cut waste. That's what we want to do. And we want to cut corrupt and fruitless expenditure. And that is what our spending review seeks to achieve, which will include obviously a review of all the ghost workers in the state to save many millions of rands that is costing the taxpayer at the moment. So there's going to have to be a spending review. We're going to have to look at where we can cut waste, not frontline services, and where we can protect the poor, especially, from any increase in taxation that makes them have to choose between putting food on the table or putting their children into school because no longer are the VAT increases affordable. For many, they are already unaffordable. But this whole issue has not yet ended, and I do want to say there is still quite a battle to be run from this point on, because if you look at the minister's statement issued in the early hours of this morning, it says the Minister of Finance will shortly introduce the rates and monetary amounts and the Amendment of Revenue Laws Bill, which proposes to maintain the value-added tax rate at 15%. In his court papers last week, he said 15.5%. Now he's saying 15%, which shows that he's clearly backed down from the 1st of May 2025. Then he says he's doing that instead of the proposed increase to VAT announced in the budget in March. So he says he will still introduce this bill, and it will be different from the one he announced in March. So he says he plans to do this, and we have concluded that means he will do it, but there is still a gap between the intention and the result, and we have to bear that very much in mind. He says the decision to forego the increase follows extensive consultations with political parties. What he critically fails to mention is that it follows the DA's court case on Tuesday, and then suddenly on Wednesday we had this change of heart. So we are now expecting from the minister's lawyers a settlement proposal, a formal settlement proposal. We will respond to that settlement proposal through our own lawyers, and if we can reach agreement, including on the issue of costs, we will seek to have that agreement made an order of court. There is a second crucial issue that comes into play here, and that is what Parliament will do around the Portfolio Committee's acceptance of the fiscal framework, or recorded acceptance of the fiscal framework, because indeed it was never put to the Portfolio Committee. And secondly, what we are going to do about Parliament's adoption of the fiscal framework that they assumed had come from the Portfolio Committee. Now, there's no precedent that we know of how that can be set aside. We believe there are two ways. One, that a court can set aside Parliament's acceptance of the fiscal framework if it was unlawful and irrational in reaching that conclusion. And on the other hand, the Speaker can reconvene Parliament to review and rescind that decision. We don't know which path will be followed at this stage. But because there were two respondents, at least in our case, SARS was the third respondent, but there were two main respondents in our case. Number one, the Minister and obviously the Department of Finance, and two, Parliament. We have to seek a settlement agreement with both before we can say that we have beaten this VAT increase. So it's important for us to say that while victory is a nose length away, we still have to cross the finishing line. And it ain't over till it's over. So we will continue fighting. We will continue negotiating a settlement through our lawyers with the Minister's legal team and hopefully with Parliament's legal team as well. So this is a complex issue. We have fought every step of the way, and we hope that we have broken it down for you in simple steps that is clear for a layperson to understand.
DA at Work, rescuing South Africa.